Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. For the past few years, host Jorden Guth has been learning about the who, the what, and the when of hi-fi from the pioneers who made our hobby what it is today, as well as the modern innovators who are constantly striving to push performance to new levels. That's not going to change, but this year he'll also be learning about the other two W's, where your favorite gear is made these days, and why. So with that out of the way, let's see who Jorden is chatting with this time around.
Hello and welcome to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Today, we're here with Otto Jørgensen, the product training manager at Dynaudio in Denmark. And this is a bit of a special episode because we're kicking off season 4, which we kind of want to have a little bit more focus on the manufacturing and how things get made and all of that. And this is also the first episode that we're actually doing in a company's location. So I'm actually here in Denmark as part of the video team, and we're filming at Dynaudio. And Otto has been gracious enough to let us film and record a podcast here at the same time. So welcome, Otto.
Thank you. It's nice to have you here.
I appreciate it. And I just want to make sure Jørgensen was the last name. I got that correct?
Yeah, you have a very good pronunciation of the Danish version of that. Yes.
Love it. All right. So before we kind of talk about Dynaudio and getting into the manufacturing, and maybe we could talk about some of the stuff that we were filming these past couple of days.
Yeah. Give
me a little bit of an insight of who you are and kind of how you came into hi-fi. I know me and you talked about this a little bit over dinner, but was there like an instigating moment for you when you discovered hi-fi for the first time and that kind of set you on your career path that led you here now?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description. I basically grew up in a home where hi-fi was not really on the radar. There was always music playing, but typically on a kitchen radio or something like that. So essentially, when I was around 14, someone played Michael Jackson Dangerous album for me on a hi-fi system, probably tricked out hi-fi system, and that just exploded my brain to get that experience of, this is actually how music is, can sound and is supposed to sound, and not just music coming out of the Philips radio. So that kind of kickstarted something in my brain. And then you get sucked in as you do in this business. Then it just went on from there.
Well, and my understanding is, you kind of mentioned this a little bit to me earlier. You started selling hi-fi. You started being a dealer in Denmark and then moving between companies, or?
Yeah, I've started in retail. So there was a hi-fi store in Denmark where I started working around 2000. And then around 2007, 2008, I had a few years with my own company doing video calibrations, audio calibrations, so traveling around to customers in their homes, trying to set up their system for better sound and video. And then, the crisis happened and Pioneer stopped selling TVs, so there was not a lot of money in calibrations anymore. So I went back into the hi-fi store, actually the same store, and worked there for about 5 years. And that's the point where a friend of mine pulled me into the Dynaudio, where I started actually as a customer care manager originally, and then fairly quickly went into product management at Dynaudio.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. And I understand we were talking about some of the different products that you oversaw in the product management role. There's actually a lot there. And this actually kind of set you up really nicely to talk about our theme for season 4, which is more around the manufacturing of stuff. And maybe because Dynaudio is quite a large company, folks might know it for the hi-fi stuff that listen to us, but what kind of other stuff does Dynaudio manufacture?
Yeah, we have different branches. They're relatively closely tied together, actually, as you have seen. But it's we started in the hi-fi space in '77, and then that was the main focus of the business for a long time, building hi-fi speakers, especially drivers. We will get back to that, I suppose. And then we, at some point, moved into, during the 90s, into the pro world, doing studio speakers. So a lot of the music that you'll be listening to have, in some stage of the production, been through Dynaudio speakers. So that's still a very important business for us. Next to that, we have our automotive business, especially what we call the pre-built systems. So if you buy a car, you could buy a branded speaker system, and that's also a very important part of our business now. So those are the three main branches that we have. Then we have a little bit also in custom install. We have done a little bit of lifestyle products in the past and things like that. But basically, we split it between hi-fi, pro, and automotive.
And Dynaudio is also an interesting company because you do quite a lot of manufacturing here in Denmark, but then there is also a substantial manufacturing effort in China.
Yeah. At this stage, we have split the production out depending on what makes the most sense. So for the hi-fi products, traditionally have all been made in Denmark. That's really where the business started. You could say the DNA of our company is our drivers, which are essentially the same across hi-fi and pro, or at least similar technologies. So different variants of the same drivers. Because we design and build everything from scratch here, we can kind of customize everything for that specific purpose. The automotive business is a much larger scale. So we do have some automotive production in Denmark, but a lot of that now is done in China. And that also kind of opens the window to, some parts of the production makes more sense to have in Denmark than others. So we're kind of branching out, making things where it makes the most sense. So today you will still see most of our speakers being made in Denmark, especially on the hi-fi and pro side.
Yeah, and kind of going through this facility the last couple of days, there's a couple of things that stand out. One is the sheer size of it. So there's quite a lot here. There's a lot going on. There's also quite a lot on the research and development side of it. And we spent some time in what's called the Jupiter room, which is a 13 by 13 by 13 meter cube that is quite large, probably the largest one, at least in Europe, probably close to one of the largest ones in the world. Regardless of where the manufacturing takes place, does all the kind of research and design come out of here, or is that also shared between locations?
Mostly what we have today is you could say all of it is developed here in Denmark. So from the conceptual ideas of the products through the development, through the audio tuning of the products is generally done here. Again, that goes for all of our hi-fi products, all of our pro products. And the automotive products as well, the tuning of the car, that's done in collaboration with the customer, the car manufacturer. That's all being done in our facilities here in Denmark. And I think that's a very important part of the process, is to have that the most important steps of that together in production and development. So that the closer they can work together, I think the easier it is to make something that functions optimally. But there are parts of the speakers where it's less important to have things in-house. For instance, aluminum parts. We don't have our own aluminum factory because an aluminum front plate doesn't really affect the sound where it's manufactured. Whereas the
design affects the sound, but the manufacturing.
Yeah, so the design of all of these parts are fully done here. So when we design a front plate, that can take a lot of time. Optimizing each particular part in the speaker, depending on the design of the speaker. So all of that will be done here, and Jupiter is an important part of that, especially for a product like the Confidence, which has a fairly advanced front baffle, which I guess we can also get into, because there's a lot of interesting manufacturing stories about that as well, that I haven't talked to you about yet. So I think that's a good place to start. Really, it's on the floor standing speakers, a quite advanced shape of the baffle and the tweeter front plate, and this has all been developed using Jupiter and using iterative adjustments, using the speed of Jupiter and how we can measure things really accurately, really quickly using Jupiter. Completely changed the way we approach the design of the products. From a production standpoint, I think the interesting part about the confidence speakers is this baffle, what we call Compex. This is a completely new material. This is not just an MDF plate that we could create in our own woodshop. This is actually a molded foam that hardens up. So it's a very different style of production. And that's not something we would have invented or manufactured here, because that's just a different skill set. So it is actually being done in Denmark, but from a sub-supplier, because they had something that we recognized might work very well for audio in terms of the combination of the weight and the stiffness and the damping in that material is quite unique. So we recognized that, hey, we can use this in our product to make the products better. So we didn't want to limit the quality of the products based on what we can manufacture when we have a supplier down the road that can actually make something for us that's better.
That's awesome. And I definitely want to talk about the confidence. And there's some other speakers that we saw today, and I think we're allowed to talk about all of them. There's nothing that...
Yeah, everything you've seen is public knowledge at this point.
Okay, so, good. Yeah. All right. I just before we kind of move on, I just want you to give people that have not seen our Jupiter Room video yet, and I don't think they will. I don't know if that video is going to be launched before before this podcast launches, but okay. I kind of set the stage for the Jupiter Room size, so this 13 by 13 cube. Meter cube. But what is the Jupiter Room? Like, what else does it entail? We know it does measurements, but what makes that possible?
Yeah, I guess looking impressive doesn't help a podcast. So to describe what it is this big concrete cube. It's not an anechoic chamber. It's a simulated anechoic chamber. So what that basically means is we raise a speaker up in the middle of the room, and then we have an arc of 31 Brüel & Kjær microphones around the speaker in a vertical 180-degree arc. And then you do one measurement is 31 points at a time. Then you spin the speaker around a little bit, do another measurement, and then you do that all the way around the speaker. And now you have a full sphere measurement of the loudspeaker within about 20 minutes. That is something that would previously take several days. And the way we do this is we know how long it takes for the sound to reach the wall of the room and then back to the microphone. And then you simply cut off the measurement before it reaches the microphone. Because the room has this fairly big size, that allows us to be very accurate to relatively low frequencies. And then on top of that, we actually mix that up with corner measurements. So we put the speaker in the corner and do a measurement there on the low frequencies, which has been calibrated towards outside measurements and other various other reference points. So we know that it's very accurate when you combine these different measurements together.
And it is actually incredibly impressive when you walk into this. And so we've toured a bunch of different companies, and one thing that we've seen here and there is anechoic chambers. What are the advantages of doing something like the Jupiter Room as opposed to a more traditional anechoic chamber?
Well, the main difference is actually speed. So it is a very accurate tool and probably more accurate than most. But the thing that makes a real difference in our day-to-day life is how quickly it can be done. So if you need to spend 2 days doing a measurement like this, you would typically maybe do it in the beginning of a project and maybe validate your result at the end of the project. But you're not really using it as a day-to-day tool because it's just not practical to wait 2 days for a measurement. So what we can do now, one of the things we can do is, especially on active speakers, we could put a pair of speakers in the listening room, do a change in the software or something about the crossover, for instance, listen to that. You have 20 minutes to do that now, while a third speaker is being measured inside Jupiter with that change. Then you can correlate what you have been listening to directly to that measurement immediately. So you can do lots of iterations and very quickly get to a result that is quite close to where you want to be. And that way of working is just improved the end result quite a lot. And it is important for me to stress that we spend more time listening than we do measuring. because you can measure a lot, but you still need to listen to the end result. That's a long and windy story about that, of course.
Well, and it makes sense, and we've kind of talked about that a little bit in person, and I think there's stuff that's going to kind of come through as we continue the conversation. The speakers that you were mentioning, so we've seen the Confidence 20A, I believe is the model that we're just listening to. That sounds awesome. But there was also a couple other ones that we've seen the entire manufacturing for as well here. The Legacy, the Contour Legacy. And there was one other one, which I'm blanking right now on the name.
That's the Contour 20 Black Edition.
Contour 20 Black. There you go. So take your pick. Let's walk through kind of the manufacturing process of one or all. I know that they do kind of have their own uniqueness in terms of the manufacturing, just based on their designs and what goes into them. But I'd love to kind of hear the kind of process that kind of goes into actually getting the speaker that lands at somebody's door. Like, how does that actually get made in a factory?
Yeah, in terms of production, I think an interesting place to start would be the Contour Legacy, because it's kind of a good example of what we are as a company. You know, it's a fairly simple box with 3 drivers and a crossover, but just made to very, very high standards. So the end result is a high performing speaker. But in terms of production, basically, you could say let's start with a tweeter. When we build a tweeter, that's our design from the ground up. So I usually present it as we start with the coated soft dome. All of our Hi-Fi and Pro speakers use a 28 millimeter coated soft dome. That coating is a material that we call DSR. And DSR is Dynaudio's secret recipe, because that's actually one of the very few secrets we have in our company. We are quite open about how we do things, but this particular one we have to keep a bit close to the chest, because it does have a significant impact on the sound of that tweeter. But essentially, we glue the textile dome part to a plastic part that holds everything together, and then we apply the coating. That dome part dry, and then we test each dome to make sure everything is according to specifications, and they actually get sorted depending on which speaker they're going into. So that's the first testing stage of that tweeter, so to speak. And then you apply that onto a magnet system. I guess I should have mentioned also, of course, we glue the voice coil to the dome, so that's the part that's being tested, is that assembly of voice coil and dome. And then we put that into the magnet system with the rear chamber that we also built here from scratch. And then we have basically a finished tweeter. And then we again test the finished tweeter, that everything is as it's supposed to be. And the woofer is a similar process. So glue the magnet system with the yoke and the top plate, glue that onto the basket of the woofer, glue voice coil together with diaphragm, together with spider, then put those parts, what we call the moving system, voice coil, diaphragm, spider, glue that into the basket. And a lot of these processes are very manual. So it actually takes a lot of time and a lot of drying time in between each of these steps. So the time that goes from starting to make these drivers to actually standing with the driver in your hand will be several days.
And you mentioned something to me. A lot of this you couldn't necessarily do in different locations. Yeah. Like you couldn't do this in China, with a large part being that there's some processes that actually have time limits. After a certain amount of time, the material is not going to absorb the glue in a way that will actually allow it to maintain contact.
Yeah, there are different steps in this that basically requires us to do it here. One is the coating of the soft dome. It actually is affected by, things like climate, both, air pressure, temperature, humidity in the air. And there's actually times of the year where we can't really do it because it's just needs to be done, everything right. It has to be kind of the same thing. It's kind of like cheese, that if you move the production to a different facility, the end result will be different, even though you use exactly the same processes. And we have tried to do this because this is expensive to do here in Denmark. But moving it to a different facility just gives a different end result. So that's one of the examples of things we just need to do here. I think one of the other things you might be alluding to is our Corona machine, which
that's what it was.
Which has nothing to do with COVID, but it's actually called a Corona treatment of the MSP cone. The MSP cone is extremely smooth. So if you apply glue to the surface, it will actually not stick to the surface. If you put a drop of water, it will literally run off the surface. So to be able to glue on it, we need to do this treatment to kind of roughen up the surface a little bit. That's some sort of ionizing of the surface that on a very small micro level scale makes it a bit rough, this surface. And this actually wears out over time. So after about 3 days, you can't actually glue on it anymore. So you have to glue the woofer within that 3-day span of Corona treating the diaphragm itself. So there are things that just has to be done together that you can't do in different places and then put together. So the whole system is just built up around that. But another thing I think is more important than that really is the design of our drivers are basically iterations of how we have built drivers for almost 50 years now. So there are ways that you can optimize production of drivers and make them much faster and easier and cheaper to manufacture. But those will not necessarily sound as good. So there are lots of things about our design that looks the way it does, because that's what we believe sounds the best. One thing to mention is the tweeter dome. The surround of the dome is a downward surround. If that goes upwards, shortly speaking, it's much easier to manufacture if we make the surround go up instead of down, but it affects the sound. So we can make everything a lot cheaper if we sacrifice the sound a little bit. And that's just not really in our genes to go in that direction. So we make what we think, sounds the best, and then we manufacture it in a way that keeps that sound quality as high as possible. And that's another story here that I can tell, since we are talking about production and where to produce things. We have our entry-level line, which is the Emmet speakers. If you look at the back of those, they will say made in China, because for the scale of manufacturing we need for those products and to reach a certain price level without sacrificing the driver quality, we ended up deciding to move the final assembly to China. But there are actually parts of this speaker that's still being done in Skanderborg in Denmark. So for instance, the coated soft dome in that speaker, even though it's made in China, is the same as in all the other speakers, meaning it comes from Denmark. So we ship that part from Denmark to China before we do the final assembly. Some of our previous speakers that also said made in China, actually we had the complete drivers made in Denmark and shipped to China. So talking about manufacturing, you can't always just look at the made in X and then assume that every single part of that speaker is then made in that country. That's not really how the world works today. So one of my pet peeves is when you say, oh, we manufacture in-house. Okay, but that only has a value if you're good at it. So you need to manufacture in-house what you're actually good at manufacturing in-house. Otherwise, you're just making the end product worse. So in our opinion, we are not actually that religious about things should be made in Denmark. We are religious about making them in the spot where it delivers the highest quality, and that will be different for different parts. So we have sub-suppliers all over the world at this point. If you go deeper into component level of our products, you will find things from Denmark, things from Asia, things from Germany, things from America actually, if you go deep enough. So it's just worldwide at this stage. So for us, it's all about how do we reach the best quality of the end product. And if that's made in Denmark, then we will do that. If it's made somewhere else, either fully or partly, then we will do that. And it's a philosophy we also have of the product itself, that we don't have a certain way of designing the product. We just want it to sound the best. And that ends up being a similar way because we have an opinion on how it should sound. But we don't have a rule book of how to build a Dynaudio speaker. We just try to do our best every time, both in terms of design of the speaker, but also in terms of production.
Because there's no necessarily rule book on this is how we're going to do every single speaker. When I was filming the Contour Legacy, it was interesting because the entire cabinet, everything is made here.
So I kind of got away from that topic. So I was talking about drivers up until this point. So for the Contour Legacy is an interesting product. This is a cabinet that is all made in-house. It's a speaker that is designed as kind of an homage to the original Contour series we did in the 90s. So we followed the original design of that speaker, and then we updated it with modern technologies and improved the quality of it all. And what it is more or less a square box with veneer on it. It looks like a simple process, but it's a natural wood that we're working with, pair matching the speakers, making sure that the surface looks and feels really nice. That's handwork, that's craftsmanship, and that's a craft that we have here in Denmark in our own factory that we personally think is unmatched, specifically for this type of cabinet. So I think a lot of people agree that this is a beautiful cabinet. So for the situations where we want to make something that is, craftsmanship, woodworking, I don't think it makes sense for us to outsource that part. If we are making a high gloss black cabinet with rounded sides that are manufactured in a completely different way, with a different target for the audio performance, then it actually does make sense to make it somewhere else, because that's not the skill set of our woodworkers. They are skilled in very specific ways. So that's why we have different approaches to each different speaker model. But for the Contour Legacy, it very much is a piece of art that our woodworkers are very proud of.
Well, and it's not just the kind of the manufacturing, the cabinets and the woodworking, but I've also recorded the sanding, the polishing, the painting or varnish. That entire process also is all done in-house in a massive paint booth with all this other stuff. So there is actually oh yeah, exactly. I actually got to go in there, which was, I think, a first. Very proud of that. But that entire step as well, like, not only is this, I think for me, the interesting thing is that could easily be outsourced, but you want to hold on to that quality. So not only are you holding on to the resources available to do that, the physical location, all that, but you also have the staff that are able to do that.
Yes, this is not something that you just teach people in 3 months. The woodworking, that's years of experience that goes into that. And that's also why you don't just change to a different way of doing things and then all of a sudden you're an expert on that too. I've always said, 10 years of experience has a 10-year lead time. It's you can't just jump that. That experience, you can't really just go out and buy that and hire a new guy and then start doing it. And that's especially true for the cabinet. But the Contour Legacy cabinets, as you saw, basically starts out with the raw plate with the veneer on that we then cut up, glue together, sanding, painting, sanding again, so on, the drying processes. All of these steps affect what you see in the end in a very meticulous way. So when you see someone, casually applying glue or with a brush spreading out the glue on the cabinet, it looks casual, it looks easy when they're doing it. But in reality, it's very meticulous work where very tiny changes in how they're doing this will actually affect the end quality of the product. And that's also a very important thing for us. Also to have consistency in that production. That is a skill that I admire quite a lot, because there's no way I could do that.
Watching the gentleman do the paint, especially, it's just mind blowing how they make it look effortless, but you can tell that there's a lot more going on than than meets the eye.
You can see on the end result, that's a good piece of work. Otherwise, it wouldn't be look as smooth and natural as it does. That's not an easy process, especially actually for something where you want to feel that it's natural wood. It's actually easier to do just a solid color paint of some kind that just needs to be a relatively smooth surface, fine. But it's actually more difficult to have the right look and feel of real wood, because if you don't do anything to it, some people think that natural wood is just untreated, but that's not the case at all, because a raw wood would not last very long in your living room. That's another part of the things we are very proud of in our company is the longevity of the products. That people are still using Dynaudio speakers that are 30 years old, 40 years old, and a lot of them still look very nice in people's living rooms. And we are very humbled about that every time someone in social media and things like that, they brag about their very old speaker that they have in their home. I think that's a very nice and cool thing to have. And that's something that we also design into the product. It's not just a case of how you manufacture the product, but it's a deep level of designing the product that you understand what will happen in 10 years with this product. Will the glue start disassembling after 10 years? Then the speaker stops working. You don't know that unless you actually have built speakers for 10 or 20 or 30 years and built them using similar processes. And that's another step where that benefit of having done it more or less the same way in more than 40 years, that helps us in ensuring that what we are supplying is something that will still work in 20 years, hopefully.
I love it. As we kind of wrap up and kind of let you get back to work, and we'll see ourselves out, the last question that I usually ask guests, and I want to continue doing this for season 4. If there was a song or a soundtrack to your life, or just music that you can listen to purely for enjoyment, out of fun, what would that be?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to prepare for that question. I knew it was coming. So I'm not very genre oriented. To me, it's all about, does the music speak to me? So I listen to quite wide variety of music. I will listen to anything that I find interesting and good. One thing I will mention, you sometimes, I don't know if you said that, you sometimes say soundtrack to your life. Yeah. The one thing I will say is a Danish band. I don't really know what to call them. They're kind of jazz, but not really. It's jazz that you can dance to, I would say. It's a band called Ibrahim Electric. Which I discovered 20 years ago during a festival here in Skanderborg, actually. That was the first time I heard them. I just saw a drum kit, Hammond organ, and a Telecaster guitar standing ready for people to play on. So I said, hey, that looks cool. So I sat down, let's see what this is. And these guys started playing, and it's just the universe of sound they can create with just those instruments and usually no singing is really amazing. They're really best live. I've probably heard them live 20 times now. So honestly, it's not really a recommendation for a hi-fi demo. They have lots of albums that are cool to listen to, but they're not perfectly recorded. That's also important for me to say that a speaker should not just be about that hi-fi demo. It should be about listening to music all day and enjoying it, and the music speaking to you. And a lot of people don't really understand that music and why I like it. So I can recommend giving it a try and then telling you if you also think I'm insane. But to me, there's something about it that just speaks to my bones, and I can't stand still when I hear it. So that's my answer.
I love it. Well, I'm definitely going to add some to my playlist. I'm gonna in the show notes, we're gonna write out the name of it just so that we get it right without messing up the spelling and all of that stuff. Sure. But thank you for the recommendation. I'll give it a listen. And we're at about our time. And thank you so much for the past 2 days of showing us around Dynaudio and then taking the time to jump on the podcast.
That's my favorite thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, Otto.
You too.